Hi, my name's Anna and I'm here to talk about our app, Conversa, a community language app. So what is Conversa? Conversa actually means talk in Portuguese, and the main aim is to connect people through a shared interest in speaking the same foreign language. Why was Conversa built? Based on a sample study of 2,000 people from Rosetta Stone, 72% of Brits believe learning a language is good for them, but only 23% have been successful in learning a second language. We felt Conversa would be able to bridge that gap in connecting people through a shared interest in foreign languages. We also felt that Conversa would attract a second audience of users whose native language might not be English. So if they wanted to maintain their mother tongue and its fluency, they could connect with people in the area. Now I'm going to go through a brief planning of our app. This was our Figma board in terms of how we wanted it to look and the setup. We also used Miro as a brainstorming tool, and we created a layout of how we want the app to look in terms of its functionalities and how it would all connect with one another.
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm going to be taking you through a quick tour of the front end code and then a quick whiz through the app on the front end. So here we've got our app component, basically houses all the routes that we've needed to navigate through the app as we've been building it. Our homepage, that just gives you basically the option to either sign in if you've used the app before or register if you're a first time user of the app. Here's our login. As you can see, after building the back end, we attempted to connect with Axios, but essentially just ran out of time. So for the purposes of the tour of the app and getting the functionality to work, we've had to use dummy data. As you can see, for login, we've used state and event handlers. We've got a first stage of the register component, which takes details like username, password. Again, you can see the attempted Axios connection. Once you've been through this first round of registration, then takes you to a second round of registration, which looks at other things like age, what city you live in, what your native language is, what the language is that you want to practice, and the competency level of the language that you want to practice. And this is all displayed down here with various options. Following a successful login or registration, you'll then get taken to the My Profile page, which is your dashboard, essentially. The personal profile component, that's basically just some personal details. We have also displayed this Search People button. So if you go to this Search People button, it has a listener, and that is listening for this here. So when that button's clicked, that's set to true. And when that's true, Search People component is displayed, and it's displayed within the modal. Once the modal's displayed, as you can see, we've got a hide create event handler, which will close the modal either by clicking the close button or by, as we can see here, clicking the backdrop. So if you click anywhere outside of the modal, it'll close it. So once we've clicked the Search People button, Search People component will be rendered within the modal. And here is where we have our functionality for where people can select the city that they live in, select the language that they want to speak, and then render all of the people that match those criteria. So here we've got state, we've got event handlers. So we've got city, change handler, which links up to the city filter here, this drop down listening for what you're selecting there. Then we have the same with language filter. Once those are selected, we've got the filter people variable, which filters through everyone in the database and returns people that match the city entered and the language. And if we go down here, we can see the city filter being rendered, the language filter being rendered. And then when we filter through all of the people in our database, the people that match are rendered within the individual person, just like a unit, which also has the message button. The message button will then take you to this chat component, which renders the React chat engine, which is a fully customizable chat engine. You can use it out the box, or you can completely tear it down and rebuild it to your purposes. To link it up, we've got the project ID here, which relates to our project ID here. So here's the React chat engine where we've set up a chat. We've allowed certain users, given more time, we would link up the login details for the chat engine with the login details for people in our backend. So when people log into the app, it automatically logs them into the chat engine. And then through this, people can chat and either continue to use the app to chat or arrange to meet up to speak whatever language they've chosen to speak. So onto the demo of the app. So we have our app here, our landing page. We can either sign in or we can register. This is the first round of registration. So we can use my details that are already in here, which basically sets up a user. And then you have an option to add more details in here. So I will base myself in Liverpool. My native language is English and I want to speak Spanish. I'm at an intermediate level. And you can add a little bit about yourself if you want. We have an option down here to flick to log in if you're already logged in. So I'll log in. We have my personal details rendered here in the My Profile page, and we have our Search People functionality. So we click on this, we're given a modal with a city to enter. So I'm in Liverpool and I want to speak Spanish, and that renders everyone in the database that speaks Spanish, and a little bit about themselves, name, age, the location, and the desired language will match, and then a little bit about me so you can get a flavour for what these people are looking for in their language learning journey. We can always do a different one. We can do London and I want to speak French. Now if we click message, this will render the Conversa chat app. So you can see my practice messages here with Anna. You can see that my messages are going to Anna, I'm offline, Anna's online, but these messages, if Anna was to log in, would ping up in her conversation.
The front-end technologies and practices we use include single-page application. We use single-page application to make our app more responsive for users and for faster transitions. We use HTML and CSS. The testing utilities we use include snapshot testing with Jest. We use snapshot testing to make sure that our user interface did not change unexpectedly. We use Git. The NPM packages we used include React Router DOM. We use React Router DOM to make sure that we implemented dynamic routing within our app. We also use React Chat Engine.
Hi, my name's Tom, and I worked with Anna on building the backend code for our Conversa app. Initially, we planned our backend in line with the front-end functionality for the MVP after initial ideation. With this in mind, we created an entity relationship diagram to visualize the data structure, which you can see here, and the relationship between our tables, as well as the routes and the relationships between the tables that we wanted to use. We then built our structure of the backend using Sequelize as our ORM library, which we thought allowed us more flexibility in querying and manipulating data from our SQL database. And it uses JavaScript, which we were more familiar with. Primarily, we did this by building a user model with the structure of our user table here and the related routes and controller functions in their separate files. We built it in this way to allow for ease as part of the login and registration functionality of the app, and as part of our connections table, routes and controllers. We wanted to return results for users to connect with each other based on their desired language and their location, which you can see in our controller function here, where we want to match users based on their location and desired language. As for a little demonstration on Postman, we can make a GET request to all of our users to see how many users we have in our table already. And this will bring our results back with all of the tables in our users table. It also gives us our native language ID, a desired language ID, and a competency ID. This relates to our languages and desired languages and competencies table in our database. So you can see Tom with an ID of 1 has a native language ID of 1 and a desired language ID of 2, which translates to Tom being fluent in English but wants to learn French. We can also make a post request to add a new user, which will also, as default values, fill in their native desired language and competency. And as for our connections, we could connect users or bring back a set of users based on their location and desired language. In this case, the ID is French, so we want to match users who live in Manchester and want to learn French. And this returns 3 users, Tom, Jimmy, and Cristiano and Werner. Finally, we also deployed our app, or a test version of our app, to Heroku just to see if it worked. And we can see that on this test version that it connects, and if we go to the users path, we can see that it brings back a list of users.
For our backend technologies, we use Docker firstly in order to package all our applications locally. npm and Express was used as a framework in order to create the API. MySQL Workbench was used to create the database and look at the data. We used that alongside SQLize to create models and formulate the relationships within the tables. And we also used that to make queries for our data. Postman was used in order to test all our endpoints. And finally, we used Heroku to deploy the back-end data so that it could be accessed via the front end.
Some of the development practices that we use include Figma. We initially used Figma to design our app and visualize the user experience. We used Trello to assign tasks and track those tasks. We used Miro to visualize the flow of our app and brainstorm using digital sticky notes for ideas. We also use WhatsApp for quick updates.
Hi everybody, my name's Ash. I was responsible for the design, the layout and the styling of the Conversa app. And I'm just going to talk to you briefly about some of the challenges and problems we faced and what we would have liked to have done if we had more time. Time constraints was the biggest challenge, especially with 5 of us with busy lives, and we weren't able to implement everything that we wanted to. We tried to get Axios to connect, but we couldn't get that done in the end, so we've had to use dummy data for the presentation purposes. Same for authorization. We really wanted to be able to have users log in, and we tried our best to get that done. Git was also quite an issue for us. It was a learning curve. It took us a long time to figure out how to deal with merge conflicts. I'm sure the other teams probably experienced some issues with Git, but I feel like we've learned quite a bit during these 2 weeks on how Git works and how useful it can be, so that's been really good. If we had more time, test-driven development is something that we really would have liked to have used, but in the end we just had to get the functionality up and running. In terms of more functionality we would have liked to have added to the app, edit my profile would have been really nice, the ability to delete your account, but again these were nice to have that we just didn't in the end have time to implement. We also would have liked to have linked the React Chat engine profiles to the back-end user profiles so that specific users could talk to each other. And the last feature that we would really like to have added is to suggest places for people to meet in their local area, such as bars or cafes or perhaps language-based events that would draw in the locations and look for suitable events to suggest to users. But again, we ran out of time.